Every single day, billions of dollars of freight are, well, they're completely at the mercy of 50 invisible rule makers.
Yeah, it's really something people don't think about.
Right. Like, you think shippers and carriers control the supply chain? Think again. I mean, when we picture the North American supply chain, we usually visualize this incredibly kinetic, visible operation, you know?
Absolutely. The trucks, the ports.
Exactly. Drivers logging thousands of miles, these massive big rigs dominating the right lane, brokers negotiating rates, port operators moving containers. It's like this massive theater production, and those are the actors on the stage.
That's a great way to put it.
But for today's deep dive, we're going behind the curtain to look at the entity that actually builds, maintains, and regulates the stage itself. We're talking about state departments of transportation, the DOTs, and how they essentially act as the unseen puppet masters of the entire logistics network.
And that invisible layer of control, I mean, it is staggering when you actually map it out.
Oh, totally.
We spend so much time analyzing the vehicles and, the freight markets that we completely overlook the 50 individual fiefdoms that allow those vehicles to legally and physically exist on the road.
Right. The states.
Exactly. The federal government, specifically the U.S. Department of Transportation, they set the sweeping national policies and the baseline regulations. But the actual day-to-day implementation, the literal paving, policing, and permitting, that falls squarely on state agencies.
Like TXDOT in Texas or Caltrans in California.
Right, or PennDOT in Pennsylvania.
Okay, let's unpack this, because understanding that separation of power fundamentally changes how you view a freight route.
It really does.
I mean, a truck traveling from Los Angeles to Dallas isn't just traversing the United States. It is navigating the specific individual regulatory environments of California, Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas.
Yeah, it's basically crossing borders.
Exactly. Each of those state DOTs is an autonomous operator, planning its own infrastructure, enforcing its own interpretations of safety rules, and taxing that movement.
Which is huge.
It is. And whether you are a logistics director calculating transit times or just a consumer who needs goods to arrive at the store, you need to understand that you're playing on 50 different game boards. Without these state agencies functioning effectively, the system wouldn't just experience minor delays. The physical network would fracture.
Right, and if we connect this to the bigger picture, the most immediate and tangible impact these agencies have is, well, the physical ground itself.
The roads.
Yeah, managing the state highways, the dedicated freight corridors, the complex interchanges, the bridges. It's a massive undertaking, and it goes far beyond just pouring asphalt.
Right, it's way more technical than that.
Oh, absolutely. We're talking about the structural engineering required to handle endless millions of tons of rolling weight, plus, the critical ongoing maintenance.
Like winter snow removal, right?
Snow removal, ice mitigation, truck parking facilities, rest areas. The quality of that specific infrastructure is directly, mathematically tied to a carrier's profitability.
Right, because I look at the highway as the literal factory floor of the trucking industry.
Oh, that's a perfect analogy.
Right. Because if you run a manufacturing plant and your factory floor is full of craters, structurally unsound and covered in debris, your assembly line slows down and your machinery starts breaking.
Exactly.
But, okay, let me challenge the economic impact here for a second.
Sure, go for it.
With margins in trucking being notoriously razor thin, are well-maintained roads really the deciding factor in a carrier's survival? Or is it just a nice-to-have convenience? Wouldn't carriers actually prefer a slightly bumpier road if it meant states lowered their fuel taxes and backed off on heavy highway tolls?
Well, no. The math on maintenance heavily outweighs the tax savings every single time.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, commercial trucks operate on incredibly tight tolerances. When a state DOT defers maintenance and a highway degrades into this washboard of potholes, the damage to a commercial vehicle is exponential.
So it's not just about a bumpy ride for the driver.
Not at all. The constant impact destroys air ride suspensions. It causes premature, irregular tire wear. It misaligns steering components.
Oh, wow.
And that drastically reduces fuel efficiency because of increased rolling resistance. So a carrier might save a few cents a gallon on a hypothetical tax cut, but they will spend thousands of dollars replacing blown tires and repairing suspension airbags long before their natural life cycle ends.
Right, and that doesn't even factor in the invisible cost of time.
Exactly.
Because a degraded freight corridor forces slower transit speeds. When drivers are operating under strict hours of service limits, shaving 10 miles an hour off their average speed because of poor road conditions means they cover fewer miles in their legally allotted driving window.
And the dominoes fall from there.
Yeah, it cascades into missed delivery appointments, strained shipper relationships, and stranded assets. The road condition is literally a line item on a trucking company's balance sheet.
Which brings up the fundamental tension of a state DOT. They spend billions engineering and building this factory floor, so their absolute top priority becomes protecting that investment.
Because heavy trucks destroy roads.
Exactly. The moment you pave a pristine highway, the clock starts ticking on its destruction. To slow that down, DOTs have to become incredibly aggressive about dictating exactly what is allowed to travel on it.
Right.
Which naturally throws us into the complex mechanics of vehicle weights and dimensions. Every state has its own rules.
And here's where it gets really interesting, because most people assume a weight limit is just a hard cap on the total pounds a truck can weigh.
Right, just a big number on a scale.
Yeah, like capped at 80,000 pounds for a standard 5-axle semi. But state DOTs don't just care about the gross vehicle weight. They care deeply about how that weight is distributed.
Because the underlying physics are fascinating. It's the difference between standing on a hardwood floor in flat shoes versus stiletto heels.
Ooh, that's a good way to picture it.
Right. The total weight of the person is the exact same, but the stiletto concentrates all that force into a tiny surface area, which damages the floor.
Right.
State DOTs enforce axle weight limits to ensure the truck's mass is spread out. But they also enforce something called the bridge weight formula.
Okay, what is that?
Well, when a heavy truck drives over a highway bridge, the concrete and steel girders have to flex and absorb that kinetic energy. If the truck's axles are too close together, all 80,000 pounds hit the same structural span at the exact same millisecond.
And that causes catastrophic structural fatigue.
Exactly.
So the bridge formula mathematically forces carriers to spread their axles further apart, distributing the load across a wider span of the bridge to prevent the infrastructure from literally snapping under the concentrated stress.
Precisely.
Which makes perfect sense for standard freight. But how does a DOT handle the truly impossible loads? Like, we're living in an era of massive infrastructure projects.
Oh yeah, the heavy haulers.
Right. Moving a 150-foot wind turbine blade or a 300,000-pound electrical transformer. You can't just throw that on a flatbed and cruise down the interstate.
Hauling specialized, oversized, and overweight freight is a logistical high-wire act. Because remember, the federal government does not issue a blanket, nationwide oversized permit.
Right. So you're dealing with the states again.
Exactly. The carrier has to negotiate with every single state DOT along the route. Moving a colossal transformer from a port in Texas to a grid station in the Midwest requires bespoke permits from Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, and wherever else they cross.
That sounds like a nightmare.
It is. And each DOT employs specialized structural engineers to review the exact dimensions and weight of that specific load against the structural integrity of every single bridge, overpass, and culvert on the proposed route.
And the DOT dictates everything about that move, right? They mandate the required number of pilot cars. They dictate the exact hours the truck is allowed to move.
Yep, often restricting them to moving only at night to minimize traffic disruption or forbidding movement entirely on holidays.
Wow. They might even require utility companies to temporarily lift power lines along the route.
And the consequences for failing to comply with these permits are severe.
Just fines, or something worse.
Way worse. A DOT enforcement officer won't just issue a costly fine. They have the authority to issue an out-of-service order right on the spot.
Oh, man.
Yeah, that means a massive multi-million-dollar load of critical infrastructure is legally stranded on the shoulder of a highway, unable to move a single inch until the carrier corrects the violation or secures a new permit.
So for these specialized carriers, securing the DOT permit is often just as crucial as finding the freight itself.
Without a doubt.
But, all of that structural engineering and meticulous weight calculation goes entirely out the window if the vehicle itself is failing mechanically.
Right.
Or if the human operating it is fatigued.
Exactly. The rules don't matter if the truck is unsafe.
Right. The physical protection of the road naturally forces the DOT into the business of protecting the people on it. Which brings us to the human element, safety audits and CDLs.
Yeah, safety enforcement is where the DOT transitions from an infrastructure manager to an active policing force. State DOTs work in tandem with commercial vehicle enforcement agencies to conduct rigorous roadside inspections.
Right, the weigh stations.
Yeah, when a truck gets pulled into a weigh station, the officers aren't just looking at the scale. They are conducting comprehensive safety audits. They're physically getting under the truck to measure brake push rod travel, checking for cracked brake drums, inspecting the tread depth on tires, and examining steering columns.
So it's essentially a pop quiz combined with a surprise mechanical audit.
That is exactly what it is. And they are also intensely scrutinizing the driver's ELD, the electronic logging device.
Right, tracking the hours of service.
Yes, tracking every minute of that driver's duty cycle to ensure compliance. If a driver has been behind the wheel for 14 hours straight, their reaction time is dangerously impaired.
Yep.
And if they're hauling hazardous materials, the inspection parameters become even more granular, verifying the exact placement of placards and the segregation of incompatible chemicals in the trailer.
But while those physical inspections are critical for catching immediate dangers, the DOT's control over the human element starts at the very beginning of a driver's career.
Oh, right, the licensing.
Yeah, state governments are the sole issuers of commercial driver licenses. The DOT establishes the testing criteria, verifies the medical qualifications, maintains the labyrinth of driving records, and wields the absolute power to suspend or revoke that livelihood.
And what's fascinating here is how they navigate that pressure.
What do you mean?
Well, there is a well-documented systemic shortage of qualified commercial drivers across the continent. So on one hand, these state agencies face immense pressure from the logistics industry and local economies to streamline workforce development, clear out testing backlogs, and get fresh drivers behind the wheel to keep the supply chain moving.
Right, but on the other hand,
Their primary mandate is zero-tolerance safety. Operating an 80,000-pound kinetic missile at highway speeds leaves absolutely no margin for error.
so they're stuck in the middle.
Exactly. A state DOT cannot lower its testing standards or ignore safety violations just to ease a labor shortage without immediately causing a spike in catastrophic highway fatalities. Balancing that demand for more capacity with the uncompromising physics of highway safety is arguably the most difficult tightrope a modern DOT has to walk.
So what does this all mean for the broader market? We've established that the DOT controls the asphalt. They dictate the exact size and weight of the freight, and they hold the keys to the driver's legal ability to operate.
Right.
How do these daily DOT decisions ripple out and manipulate the economics of the entire industry? Like, let's look at the drivers first.
Well, for the professional driver, the DOT dictates their daily reality. An effective DOT dramatically improves a driver's quality of life.
By building out expanded commercial truck parking.
Right, yes, which is a critical safety issue because drivers often spend hours just trying to find a safe, legal place to sleep. Plus, rapid snow removal, clear signage.
But the frustrations are equally profound.
Oh, absolutely. An aggressive DOT inspection blitz can throw a driver hours behind schedule. Construction detours can force them onto secondary roads that weren't built for combination vehicles, which just spikes their stress and driving time.
And then that ripple hits the carriers directly in the wallet.
Oh, operating on tight margins, they feel the direct financial sting.
Yeah, the sheer administrative overhead required to manage 50 different sets of state compliance laws is staggering. Carriers have to employ entire compliance departments just to track which state requires what permit, paying exorbitant fees along the way.
And conversely, good policies lower fuel and maintenance costs.
Right. But I think the most interesting ripple effect lands on a group of people who never even physically touched the trucks. Freight brokers.
Oh, the brokers are heavily impacted.
Yeah, I mean, a broker sits in an office matching a shipper's freight with a carrier's truck. They're essentially trading on capacity. So why does a broker need to care if a state DOT closes a bridge or changes a weight limit?
Because those DOT decisions instantly manipulate the law of supply and demand within a given region.
Give me an example.
Okay, a perfect example of this is the implementation of spring weight restrictions, which are commonly known as frost laws.
Frost laws.
Yeah. In northern states and across Canada, when the winter freeze begins to thaw, the ice trapped in the subgrade of the highway melts, the roadbed essentially turns into a wet sponge.
Right. The asphalt on top loses its structural support.
Exactly. And if you drive a fully loaded semi over a sponge, you will obliterate the road surface.
That makes sense.
To prevent total destruction of the highway during the spring thaw, northern DOTs aggressively slash the allowable weight limits on secondary highways. Suddenly, a truck that normally carries 45,000 pounds of payload is legally restricted to carrying only half of that.
Oh, wow. Think about the massive domino effect that triggers for a freight broker.
It's huge.
If a shipper still needs to move 100,000 pounds of lumber out of a forest in Michigan during a spring thaw, the broker can no longer hire just 2 standard trucks. The DOT's weight restriction forces them to hire 4 or 5 trucks to move the exact same volume of freight.
And the local supply of available trucks evaporates overnight.
And when capacity evaporates, freight rates skyrocket.
Yep. Smart brokers operate like meteorologists. They are predicting the weather of the supply chain.
I like that.
If a broker is tracking DOT infrastructure announcements, monitoring seasonal weight restrictions, and anticipating inspection blitzes, they understand exactly when and where truck capacity is going to tighten.
So they secure their carrier capacity early.
Exactly. And they adjust their pricing to the shipper long before the market panic sets in. The state DOT is actively shaping the market forces the broker trades on.
That economic leverage is incredible. But looking at the sheer volume of freight moving today and the thousands of miles of infrastructure to monitor, it's obvious that DOTs can no longer rely purely on physical roadblocks, manual inspections, and guys in hard hats filling potholes.
No, they can't. They have to look to the future.
Which brings us to the future landscape of state transportation agencies, long-term planning, automated tech enforcement, and the complexities of cross-border transit.
Right. Modern DOTs are functioning as high-level economic planning hubs. They operate dedicated freight divisions that rely on massive data analytics.
So they're not just looking at today's traffic.
Not at all. They aren't just counting the cars on the road today. They are modeling supply chain bottlenecks, analyzing inbound container volumes at deepwater ports, and tracking the massive expansion of inland warehouse logistics parks. They use all this data to plan intermodal corridors and highway expansions 20 to 30 years into the future.
Okay, but let me push back on that for a second. When a state DOT studies port activity or warehouse development today, are they really dictating how freight will move decades from now, or are they just playing catch-up to the economy?
That's a fair question, but it's actually a fascinating feedback loop. When a state DOT proactively invests billions into developing a state-of-the-art freight corridor or a modernized intermodal rail hub, they aren't just reacting to traffic, they're actively magnetizing the local economy.
Oh, I see.
Major retailers and logistics companies decide where to build their next 1 million square foot distribution centers based entirely on a DOT's 20-year infrastructure roadmap.
So the DOT effectively draws the map of future commerce.
Precisely. And managing that future commerce requires a total technological overhaul of how enforcement is handled. We were seeing a massive pivot away from the physical weigh station toward automated digital screening.
Yeah, talk about that, because technologies like weigh-in motion sensors and virtual weigh stations, that sounds like science fiction compared to the old method of making every single truck pull off the highway onto a scale.
It really does.
How does a virtual weigh station actually target a truck?
Well, the technology is seamlessly integrated into the highway itself. State DOTs embed these piezoelectric sensors directly into the asphalt of the mainline interstate.
Really? Just right in the road?
Right in the road. As a truck drives over these sensors at 70 miles per hour, the system instantly calculates the gross weight, the individual axle weights, and the bridge formula spacing.
That's incredibly fast.
It is. And simultaneously, overhead gantries equipped with transponder readers and automated license plate cameras identify the specific truck and the carrier operating it.
So in the fraction of a second it takes the truck to pass under the camera, the DOT system has weighed the vehicle and pinged a national database to pull the carrier's safety rating, their out-of-service history, and their permit status.
Exactly. And this raises an important question about the future philosophy of regulation.
So?
Because these tools allow DOTs to implement a system of highly targeted enforcement. If the algorithms determine the truck is a legal weight and the carrier has a pristine safety record, the driver gets a green light on their transponder and bypasses the inspection site entirely.
So it actively rewards compliant behavior with operational efficiency.
Yes. While the DOT can focus all of their physical enforcement resources specifically on high-risk carriers with a history of brake failures or hours of service violations.
It's the ultimate efficiency hack for the supply chain.
Right.
And, zooming out even further, this high-tech, highly integrated approach to freight regulation isn't isolated to the United States.
Right.
Looking at the Canadian market, you see the exact same infrastructure challenges, the same weight physics, and the same technological evolutions happening at the provincial level.
Yeah, and the integration between the U.S. and Canada is a crucial piece of this puzzle. The two nations share one of the most lucrative trading relationships on the planet. In Canada, provincial transportation ministries operate with the exact same mandate as U.S. state DOTs.
Right, like the Ministry of Transportation of Ontario.
Exactly. They heavily monitor commercial vehicle safety, enforce provincial weight regulations, combat licensing fraud, and manage the infrastructure of massive trade arteries.
And the regulatory decisions made by a Canadian province have direct, immediate economic consequences in the U.S.
Oh, 100%.
If Ontario decides to aggressively audit licensing fraud or initiates heavy construction on the highway leading to the Ambassador Bridge in Detroit, the resulting bottleneck instantly disrupts the automotive manufacturing assembly lines in Ohio and Michigan.
Yep. A delay at a provincial way station cascades across the border and destroys a just-in-time delivery schedule thousands of miles away.
It perfectly illustrates the core reality of the modern supply chain. The economic vitality of a region is inextricably linked to the competency of its transportation agency.
It really is the foundation of everything.
A poorly managed DOT or provincial ministry creates physical bottlenecks, deferred maintenance disasters, and unpredictable enforcement delays. Those inefficiencies inflate the operating costs for every carrier, which inevitably drives up the price of goods for you, the end consumer.
Conversely, a forward-thinking DOT that leverages technology and maintains pristine infrastructure acts as an economic catalyst. It promotes reliable trade and massive regional growth.
So to bring this all together, state DOTs and provincial ministries are so much more than the crews we see laying asphalt during the summer construction season.
They really are.
They are the essential, unseen directors, the underlying operating system of the North American economy. They engineer the physical factory floor, they dictate the boundaries of physics for moving freight, they police the safety of the human workforce, and they architect the future layout of commercial logistics.
They hold the blueprints and the rulebook for every single movement in the logistics space.
Right. Every time a product arrives perfectly on time to a store shelf, it is because a local transportation agency successfully balanced the brutal demands of heavy industry with the uncompromising need for public safety.
It's a massive balancing act.
Which leaves us with a truly fascinating thought to chew on. We talked about how these DOTs are rapidly deploying invisible technology piezoelectric sensors in the asphalt, algorithmic safety databases, digital permits that cross-reference in milliseconds.
Yeah, the digital screening.
As these systems become universally adopted and deeply integrated across state and national lines, will we eventually see a future where physical borders become completely irrelevant to freight movement?
It's a wild thought.
Imagine a supply chain where that complex, shifting stage of 50 different rulemakers evolves into one seamless, continent-wide superhighway. A future where a compliant truck moving from Monterrey, Mexico through the United States all the way to Calgary, Alberta, never has to touch its brakes for a human inspector ever again, guided entirely by the invisible hand of integrated algorithms.
It's definitely where we're heading.
But that is a deep dive for another day. Thanks for joining us.